Wow, exciting stuff. What a time to be alive. The JFK files dropped yesterday. In fact, they're continuing to be dropped in waves. There's over 80,000 pages here that numerous people are currently sifting through. So, a lot of information to digest. And, since it just came out yesterday and is still coming out in waves, I suspect we'll be finding out a lot of information here in the coming months, but we're going to go over what we know so far. And it certainly doesn't disappoint. Of course, this has been a subject where numerous people have engaged in all sorts of conspiracy theories. And it turns out some of the speculation that some people have made about the JFK assassination has turned out to be true. Other points remain to be seen. Of course, one of the points that appears to be validated here is some involvement on part of the CIA in the assassination. So we're going to actually take a look at that. We're going to take a look at a number of videos. We're actually going to get some feedback here and assessments from an historian who is an expert on the JFK files. We're then going to take a look at Representative Luna and Representative Burchett and some of their comments that they have made on this. It's all incredibly fascinating. But before we dive in, there's actually a situation currently going on, and has been information that has been breaking in the last hour. In fact, I'll share it on my screen. There is a situation where a man has appeared with a gun at the CIA building, at the CIA headquarters. And looks like the situation is still developing. Not a whole lot of information about it so far. I don't know if it's related to the information that we're getting with the JFK files and the CIA at some level having some complicity here with the assassination of JFK. So here's one report: armed man near CIA headquarters brings a large police response. And so the area is taped off. A large police response was seen outside the CIA headquarters on Wednesday morning. Roads in the area are shut down to traffic due to the police presence. According to the Fairfax County Department, authorities are responding to reports of an armed man experiencing a mental health crisis on CIA property just outside headquarters. Again, is this related to the bombshell information that has come out about the CIA concerning the JFK assassination, or is it completely coincidence and unrelated? I don't know. Fairfax County Police are providing crisis negotiators and other support to CIA police who are leading the investigation. Additional details have not been made public. As of 11:25, Dolly Madison Boulevard is shut down in both directions between Georgetown Pike and Seville Lane. Drivers are asked to avoid the area, and it's still a developing story. So we don't know a whole lot about it, but this is continuing to unfold. So we'll find out more soon, I suspect. So let's go ahead and maybe dive into some of these videos before we look at some of the files themselves. We are going to take a look at about a dozen or so files. So I'm going to pull them up on the screen, show them to you so you can see firsthand the information. But I also want to get some assessment from another number of others and their commentary. And so we're going to take a look at some comments that were recently made. I think it was actually earlier today, this morning, on Fox News by an historian on the question of, is there a significant change with the information that we've been able to sift through so far in the JFK files? And he's going to say, yeah, and he's going to explain how. So let's maybe take a look at that together. I'm going to pull up the video here on the screen so that you can watch it with me. Please let me know if there are any difficulties with hearing the video. Just put a comment there in the comment section. Let me make sure that you can hear the audio, and I'm going to mute mine at the same time so there's no echo. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. This one's pretty fascinating.
Welcome back. I'm Austin Westfall. Well, today was the day. Thousands of pages of previously unseen files related to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy were released today. Right now, over 1,100 documents totaling roughly 80,000 pages are visible on the National Archives website. This comes after President Trump's push to release the files, and standing by is a man who knows the history of the assassination well, presidential historian and author James Robinault. What have we learned today, James?
Well, Austin, we learned a lot about the CIA. Most of these documents are CIA type documents, from their plan to try to assassinate Castro. Operation Mongoose is what it was called. Lots of detail on that, involving mafia figures to help them. It's an incredible story. To Jack Ruby and Oswald being seen in a nightclub, according to a CIA memo weeks before the assassination, to all sorts of discredit on the single bullet theory that the ballistics people thought, that this just didn't happen back when the Warren report came out, to the CIA operation out of Mexico City.
I do just have to pause it and say, did you catch that? Jack Ruby and Oswald seen in a nightclub together. What are the odds? Is this really just coincidence? I mean, again, to remind you, Ruby is the one who assassinated Oswald, who's the one who assassinated Kennedy. And so this is pretty weird stuff here.
And all the intelligence they were gathering on Oswald. So it is a truckload of information. It's going to take weeks to analyze. Their 100-page depositions in it. It truly is a real trove of information that begins to paint a much stronger picture that the CIA knew kind of what was coming, and may have been involved in the group out of Miami that was the anti-Castro group that may have been setting up Oswald. So a ton.
And there's the massive bombshell. And we're actually going to see evidence for that in the documents themselves. We're going to take a look at that in just a moment. But that's massive. That means a group within the government, the CIA, who one person in the documents and the files calls the CIA a state within a state operating independently and doing things contrary to the agenda of the American government. Um, the CIA, or a group within the CIA, not only knew about this, but had a hand in it. So this is just absolutely wild stuff.
Ton of stuff.
Does this change the official narrative?
I think it will. I mean, I think what we're going to end, as I've said before, this is like a big jigsaw puzzle, and we have a lot of pieces in place. What we didn't know were some of the identities of some of these people, and the CIA documents. Everybody's got a code name, so that's going to take a long while for people to unravel. But I think it's going to show that they were very active with the group that was entangled with Oswald in New Orleans in the summer of 1963. And the evidence is starting to look more and more like they were setting up Oswald, and that the anti-Castro group were the people who might have pulled the triggers. So I think there's a lot here to work with, a lot to analyze. And as you know, because of Paul Landis's revelation that he found the bullet in the limousine that you and I have talked about so much, that tends to prove there was an ambush, that there were multiple shooters. This will then start to give us a better idea of who might have been involved.
Right, and so that has been the subject of numerous claims. People have said that there couldn't possibly only have been one shooter, Lee Harvey Oswald. There had to be multiple shooters, and the evidence is, seems to support that from what we're seeing in the newly released JFK Files. Something that we kind of already knew about because we did see some individuals from the government indicating that when this is released, yes, it will be confirmed that there was a second shooter. So we kind of had some idea that this was going to be in there.
Yeah, so let's back up on that. So for people that are watching that haven't watched our interviews before, why do you feel it is appropriate to question the actual story, and you know what? I will say this too, by the way. The official version of the story is that Oswald was the lone gunman. So why do you feel like it's fair to question that theory?
Yeah, I think that the main thing is that when Paul Landis found the pristine bullet behind where Kennedy had been sitting and Jackie had been sitting, it showed that that bullet had only gone superficially into his back and that it fell back out. That means that the bullet didn't go through him into Conley, which is the official version. And, one bullet caused all this damage, which nobody ever believed. The problem is Kennedy gets hit, and within a split second, you can see that Conley gets hit. So there's not enough time for Oswald, who has a bolt action, to shoot about 3 seconds, load and shoot again to hit Conley. So there had to be multiple shooters. And once we know that, we know that there's a conspiracy. Once we know there's a conspiracy, then the question is who was involved in it. But that evidence is pretty strong that there were multiple shooters.
From what you have seen of the documents, are there redactions?
No, I haven't yet seen any, and I've seen people write who've been through a lot more than I have that they haven't seen them yet. I think they really did take off the redactions. And again, this is going to help put together these pieces of the puzzle because you have these various people who are identified in Miami, you have the people identified in Mexico City, and now you're starting to put all this stuff together to see what the puzzle looks like once you put those pieces in.
So I got to ask, this is something that you and I have talked about ad nauseum. I mean, the assassination happened in the 60s. Here we are in the 2020s now talking about this. Why did it take so long for these documents to be released?
Now, I don't know if I believe the answer he's about to give. I mean, I think there might be some truth to it, but I think that there's probably more to it. But let's first hear what he has to say. Why did it take so long?
I think the answer to that is that when the Warren report came out, President Johnson and Hoover in particular were very much trying to end the controversy and not spark World War III. They were worried that this was going to be blamed on the Cubans. They were worried it was going to be blamed on the Russians, and they were not willing to risk nuclear war over all of this. So they very much pushed the Warren Commission to get it done, blame it on one person. And at that point, the Warren Commission came out with a report that started to fall apart almost right away, but a lot of people still hung on to it. And the only reason that it's taken all these years is that the CIA convinced president after president that there were still people alive, there were still operations that they needed to protect. And it's only really in the last year that we finally have somebody saying, well, let's enough of that. Let's see all of it. It cannot be that we are going to destroy people or operations 60 years later. But it's going to be embarrassing, which it is to the CIA.
That I think is the biggest reason right there because it decreases people's confidence in the government when already it's at an all-time low, right? I mean, I don't think most people really have a whole lot of confidence in the government. And this just certainly does even more damage whenever you find out, okay, actually, a group within the CIA was behind um, and had some responsibility in and had knowledge and awareness of the assassination of the United States president. And so I think that is certainly one of the biggest reasons why this was hidden for so long.
Can you help us differentiate between reliable sources and conspiracy theories that are out there? There's no shortage of conspiracy theories related to this assassination. And when you start to question the official narrative of something, of course, conspiracy theories are ever more apparent during those times as well. I got to ask you, James, how do you, when you're researching this, and as you're doing research and looking through these documents, what advice would you have for people to avoid misinformation related to the assassination?
Well, you look for people who, when they say something, have evidence to back it up and aren't getting into speculation. A lot of conspiracy theories say, well, here's what we know, and then here's my speculation. And they go off in wild tangents. And I'll give you a good example. I've said this before. The Mary Farrell Group, which has their primary source documents online. Jefferson Morley, who I interviewed for Vanity Fair. These guys are very careful journalists. They have to have proof before they say something. but they also can put things together and support it with evidence. So you're really looking for people who have carefully scoured the record, can point to documents, and are not based in just raw speculation about crazy stuff in particular. That's one tell.
Yeah, I think that's a good rule of thumb. My concern here is this is going to give a significant boost to a lot of the conspiracy theorists' voices that are currently on social media and, well-known content creators. I'll give you an example. This will certainly give a boost to people like Candace Owens. Um, but that doesn't then validate her position that dinosaurs are fake. To use her phrase, fake and gay, that they don't, didn't actually exist, or that the Earth might actually be flat and not round, or that we did not land on the moon. I I fear that this is going to then validate some of those voices, and then it will give some legitimacy to some of the crazy things that they say. So I do think that is going to be an after effect of this, which I think we all kind of saw coming anyway. Okay, but let's continue.
But people like Jefferson Morley and Mary Farrell go to that website. When they say something, they'll show you the document they're relying on. And that's important. You need to have facts.
So what's next? More documents? Are we expecting more releases?
Yeah, as I understand it, this is a first tranche. That there's still a lot more to come out, and so I think we will see that over the next few days. Of I think more. What happened was Trump said get it all out, and I think the lawyers of the Department of Justice stayed up all night trying to make sure they could release some stuff, but they haven't released all of it. So that's still to come. And then what's really going to happen is people who are very deep into this are going to start to analyze it very closely and pull stuff out and point it out. And it's going to be fascinating. It's like a big detective story. It's really amazing stuff, especially when you read some of these memos on Project Mongoose, the whole operation to assassinate Castro with pills and all sorts of stuff. I mean, it really you'll be amazed, I think, once this begins to really get analyzed over the next few weeks.
So we talked about this during the when we marked 60 years since the assassination happened, and then we talked about the assassination again in February when we heard that the FBI had discovered 2,400 new records. That's the way I believe it was phrased. Discovered 2,400 new records related to the assassination. What's our understanding? Is that 2,400 records embedded in what was released today? Is that at a future date? Is that unknown?
Yeah, the sources that I rely on say those are not yet in there. So we have not seen those 2,400 FBI records yet. It doesn't surprise me. I think
Again, they are coming in waves, and last night there was a second wave that was added, and they're going to release 100% of the files. They claim, they say. So I suppose we'll give it a few more days, but allegedly they're going to release the entire thing, hold nothing back.
the ones that we are seeing are ones that have been reviewed multiple times over the years, and these FBI ones are brand new. So those will probably come out a little bit later, but I fully expect them to come out based on Trump's order and the fact that we're moving forward in a brand new world of getting this stuff out without redactions. It's really amazing and appropriate.
Right. Yeah, this is absolutely fascinating. From what I see, there are no redactions, but there were some requests to make some redactions. We're going to actually see what those are. You can probably guess what all they wanted redacted here. Let's take a look, however, at a few more clips before we dive into the documentation itself. Let's take a look at Representative Luna. She claims that the documentation shows that the CIA, to use her phrase, was dirty and complicit in this assassination. And we're again going to look at some material from the files that indicates that appears to be the case. And so let's see what she has to say. She appeared on Benny in his show, The Benny Show, about an hour or so ago. So this is just really, really, really new.
You is, when you see these documents coming forward, the one thing that I am specifically looking for with my team is a CIA Inspector General report that actually was filed from members within the CIA that admitted that the CIA was intentionally hiding information from Congress during the Warren Commission, as the information, as you were saying now, implicated the CIA. And so that document in itself is going to be key for our hearing. Whether or not we find out who actually pulled the triggers, I don't think that we'll see an actual name, because from my understanding, information has been destroyed. However, the information that's been brought forward, as you're seeing, is creating a bigger picture and filling in many gaps. I think answering questions that Americans have had for decades on what actually transpired on that day in Dallas with JFK. And frankly, what we're finding is the CIA is and was a lot dirtier than anyone could have ever imagined. Thank goodness we have good people in charge who are going to be flushing the system.
So yeah, so what she's indicating here is actually something I saw a person just mention in the chat earlier, and even if everything is released, which again, all of the files are supposed to be released and are currently still being released, but even if everything is released, is that really everything that had been obtained, or were some of the records destroyed? That is something that I think a whole lot of people are still going to wonder about. Even if we get everything, is this really everything, or were there other documents that were destroyed years ago? Let's take a look at
We're
this
talking
other
upwards
comment
of like
here
what,
from
50?
Representative Luna, who says that the documentation shows that the CIA suppressed evidence about the assassination. So let's go ahead and dive into that. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see what she has to say.
We're talking upwards of like what, 15 plus witnesses, not to mention that the Warren Commission, which was initially set up by Congress to investigate the assassination of JFK, knowingly omitted information that would have been considered evidence, right? So, like, I'm not a criminal investigator. However, I can put two and two together. And what I can tell you is when you have a congressional committee omitting or failing to admit evidence, and then in addition creating a narrative, which we know now with modern day technology and also witness testimony, that again the magic bullet theory was faulty. I mean, the fact is that we have basically everything that we could have ever imagined, wanted, and more. We are going to be able to answer those questions. But again, Benny, I mean, looking back at what happened, I did also find in one of the documents yesterday, as I was going through this with the American people, and you saw in real time all of these bombshells are coming out on X of all places, is that you actually also saw that allegedly JFK had asked at the time the leader of Russia for information on rogue CIA agents. And so, isn't that interesting that he was inquiring on this, and then obviously he ends up assassinated? So look, we have a lot to go through. Again, there's thousands upon thousands of documents, but
Yeah, I mean, we're going to be finding out information for months to come because, again, 80,000 documents, that's going to take a long time to digest. And yes, I see you, Alice, there in the chat. She says, we who lived during that time have known what really happened, researched the Bay of Pigs. Yeah, that's an interesting point because it does have some information about that concerning the attempt to overthrow the Cuban government. There is some information that we're going to take a look at here in just a moment in relation to that point, and much more to be seen. I'm just going to show you a snippet. So let's watch one more clip, however, that I want you to see from that same video. The Representative Luna video. Actually, no, from the Benny show. This is going to be Representative Burchett, who makes a pretty interesting claim. He says that LBJ, who of course, right, came right after JFK. He was the vice president for JFK. He was actually his vice president, and then was made president whenever JFK was assassinated. He's going to claim that the documentation indicates that LBJ was actually behind this. So not just the CIA, but the vice president as well. And so let's take a quick look at that clip here where he drops that bombshell on the mini show.
So your contention here is that the federal government had a major hand, potentially LBJ had a major hand in the assassination of Kennedy.
I think so. I think he was an evil, corrupt dude. I understand he got saved before he died, Billy Graham, at his ranch. But just everything about that guy. He's mean, he's crooked. I mean, he's what Washington is if they're allowed, before you were exposed to all this stuff. And he was allowed to do that. And he was an evil, mean man.
So, putting aside the evangelical stuff there about he got saved and all that, putting that issue to the side, he's thoroughly convinced that LBJ was behind this, and the documentation brings that forward. I would like to see where the documentation indicates that. I'm not necessarily saying it doesn't, but there's 80,000 pages to work through here, and I just haven't seen that one so far. But I did find that one pretty interesting. Josh says that now he does believe that about LBJ. Yeah, I would just like to see the evidence for it. But I thought that was interesting because that was like the first thing he said. He just made a beeline for that comment as soon as he got on the Benny show. So he's pretty convinced of that. Now let's take a look at some of the documentation itself, some of the files. Let's go ahead and dive into them. Let me share my screen and let me maybe show you the first one that came up in the document dump, and also that began to make the rounds on the internet. This one is really, really fascinating. So it's a memorandum, 19th of July, 1967. So the subject is John Garrett Underhill Jr. So it says Ramparts of June 1967 contains the following pages about subjects. The day after the assassination, Gary Underhill left Washington in a hurry. Late in the evening, he showed up at the home of friends in New Jersey. He was very agitated. A small clique within the CIA was responsible for the assassination. And this is something that he confided. So he's freaking out, in a panic, in a frenzy, because he believed a small clique within the CIA was responsible for the assassination, he confided. And he was afraid for his life and probably would have to leave the country. Less than 6 months later, Underhill was found shot to death in his Washington apartment. The coroner ruled it suicide. So this is an admission that no, he was shot, and I think it was in the back of the head. And the coroner ruled it self-deletion, right? Wow. Okay. J. Garrett Underhill has been an intelligence agent during World War II and was recognized authority on limited warfare and small arms, a researcher and writer on military affairs. He was on a first-name basis with many of the top brass in the Pentagon. He was also on intimate terms with a number of high-ranking CIA officials. He was one of the agency's unpeople who performed special assignments. At one time, he had been a friend of Samuel Cummings of Interarmco, the arms broker that numbers among its customers the CIA and, ironically, Klein's Sporting Goods of Chicago, from whence the mail order Carcano allegedly was purchased by Oswald. So there's some connection there with Oswald, clearly, but also this was a person who was in the know with the CIA and was an intelligence officer during World War II. And he testifies that small clique within the CIA was responsible for the assassination, and he was afraid for his life. And 6 months later, he allegedly self-deleted. But the documentation here indicates he was found shot to death. So that's massive news. Again, this is why you're seeing people saying the CIA was behind it. Because of testimony like this. And this is one of the reasons why it seems this documentation did not come out until now, because this makes the CIA look really bad. It makes the government look really bad. And it makes people who already don't trust the government trust it even less. And then it also is something that I'll have to just point out. There's a connection here, at least with the situation with Trump, with his 2 assassination attempts. There's actually a lot of parallels with what was going on at the time with JFK and what happened with 2 assassination attempts on Trump. And in fact, a number of people have pointed this out. Um, and it kind of shows like some of the games and some of the stuff that was going on with the government back in the day with JFK. Some of those problems still exist today. And this is one of the reasons why there were assassination attempts on Trump. I mean, you look at all the situation and you say, with all the evidence that we have, how in the world could this have even taken place? How could the shooter get up there and this happen and blah, blah, blah? It seems like there was some people on the inside who allowed for this to happen. It wouldn't be the first time. Now we know it happened. Now we know for sure it happened with JFK. Might that be one of the reasons why we saw the attempts on Trump? Perhaps. Might be a connection there. And I am kind of wondering why Trump hasn't released more information about those assassination attempts. Be that as it may, let's go ahead and continue to another point here. Let me bring up another documentation for you. Let's see what else we got. We got about a dozen pages here. Okay, let's take a look at this one. This one was posted by WikiLeaks. I think you might find it pretty interesting. So WikiLeaks says CIA suppressed top officer James Angleton's connection to Israeli intelligence as shown by this newly unredacted JFK assassination records file. Angleton had subverted JFK's policy of preventing Israel from acquiring nuclear weapons. We actually, we were told that Israel doesn't have nuclear weapons, but there's a lot of indication that they do. JFK was opposed to them obtaining nuclear weapons, but this insider was subverting JFK's policy of preventing Israel from acquiring nuclear weapons and was praised by Mossad as the biggest Zionist of them all. Angleton was also found to have hidden documents from the Warren Commission on the assassination of President Kennedy. Again, that was the report that came out that kind of explained it was just Oswald. It was just one guy. And clearly we're finding out, no, there was a lot more to it, which most people already knew anyway, right? Shortly before he died, Angleton stated, "The better you lied and the more you betrayed, the more likely you would be promoted. Outside of their duplicity, the only thing they had in common was a desire for absolute power." The file was released in 2017, but in a redacted form. Now it's unredacted, and now we get to see, what was previously hidden when it was released in 2017. And what was redacted was the part here in brackets that's highlighted, the Israeli intelligence service. And you can see a note at the top that says CIA has no objection to declassification and or release of CIA information, except in this document, the part that here is in brackets, and it's the Israeli intelligence service. And whenever you look at a lot of the documentation, it admittedly is unredacted now, but there are notes like this to redact Israeli intelligence service. The only time we ever come up with a note like this is whenever it involves Israel. And so some people are pointing that out and coming up with their theories as to why that is. Let me show you one request to redact Israeli intelligence service. I'll actually show you a number of them. Here's from a memorandum, 1967, July 13th. You can see they requested to redact Israeli intelligence service. And that note here is on the side, 8798. Obviously, they released it without the redaction, but there was a request on part of the CIA. Hey, yeah, release everything except that part. Go ahead and block that out. And you have to ask the question, well, why is that? Why did they need to redact this information? Let's take a look at another one, a request for redaction. Here on this memorandum from April 30th of 1954, they're requesting the word Israeli, and Israel to be redacted. CIA has no objection to declassification and or release of CIA information in this document, except the parts that are bracketed. And it's the same guy, Lee 8798, and Israel, Israel, Israel. Uh, it doesn't stop there. There's another one here. Let me pull that one up. You should be able to see it. Okay. CIA has no objection to declassification, except in brackets. And again, it's this Lee guy, the Israeli Intelligence Service. And so there's a lot of these, right? And so people are starting to point that out. In fact, I'll show you a few people who are commenting on it, who are offering different sides, different takes. So let's go to one of them, and people who are saying this implicates Israel in the assassination, others who are saying no, it doesn't. So let's take a look at this. You should be able to see it on your screen here. So apostate prophet. Well, actually, let's look at Adam first. Adam says JFK files reveal CIA Israeli intel pipeline. Newly released files expose a secret CIA Israeli intelligence link personally overseen by counterintelligence chief James Angleton. This wasn't routine intel sharing. It was a covert pipeline bypassing standard channels to shield the Israeli government. In fact, let me pull up his full post so you can see the whole thing here. Let's see. Let me grab it. Okay. Looking for it. Okay. There. Okay. To shield Israel's role in U.S. operations, Angleton acted as the sole gatekeeper, scrubbing reports and controlling intel flow to the FBI, ensuring Israeli intelligence remained hidden in plain sight. And shows you some of the documentation there, which I've looked through as well. But so that's one take, right? That Israel to one degree was behind this. Another take is no. What the files reveal is that Israeli intelligence worked closely with U.S. intelligence, especially in counterintelligence regarding the Soviet Union. These files show that Israel has been a trusted ally for a long time. They don't implicate Israel. Laugh out loud. Okay, so two different interpretations of the same evidence. Well, you'll need to go through the actual documentation. It's pretty lengthy, so we can't do it today on the show. You'll need to go through it and kind of determine for yourself. Does the information show that Israel is an ally, or does it show that there was some concerning stuff going on with the Israeli government? Let's move on to another point here. Let me grab another file to take a look at. Let's see what we got. Okay. This one is fascinating. I came across this just right before the show. So this one says, this is a letter from Sergei, I don't even know how to pronounce that, from California to the Russian ambassador at the U.S. Embassy, or the Russian Embassy in the United States, Washington, D.C. And he says this: at 9 a.m. on August 19th, 1963, in Washington, D.C., I went to see the director of Special Counselor Service, Department of State at 1901 Pennsylvania. I told the director that I have information about President Kennedy. The director said, do not mention the name of President Kennedy, only respond to the questions. The director said to tell us what will happen to Mr. Lee Harvey Oswald then. I said, Mr. Lee Oswald will be killed after he kills Kennedy. I said, I will take the truth drug to tell the truth. Director, tell us who get killed in this country. I said, clearly his English isn't, I said, as I heard that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. will be killed. Who will kill Dr. King? I said a man who is in prison at this time. Mr. James Earl Ray was in prison at the time, so he had information about um, MLK being killed, and he was right about that. And he also says that Kennedy is going to be killed, and he's going to be killed by Lee Harvey Oswald, and Oswald will then be killed himself. And he was right. Director asked where assassination will happen. I said in Dallas, Texas. So they were told where the assassination would take place. And it's conspicuous on that day instead of kind of being in that bubble shield um, car. He was out in the open, exposed. And that was by choice and not necessarily his choice. Um, and so they knew that this was going to happen. They were told where, and yet they took all these additional risks, putting them in harm's way. Why is that? Well, because there were clearly some people in the CIA who were part of this. Director said if someone gave this information here, I would expel the man. Director did call on FBI agents after FBI used anesthesia gas to freeze me, to drug me, to keep amnesia, he says. I told Director of State that Lee Oswald had a weapon. Go see him. Director told me, you can have a weapon. So what if Oswald got a weapon? Okay, so he just kind of brushed it off. Well, Oswald can have a weapon. So that doesn't mean anything, kind of thing. But look, you got a name, you got a location, you got all of that. This guy tried to sound the alarm, and nobody listened. Well, they listened, but some people swept this under the rug, I should say. So this one was just absolutely jaw dropping. Let's look at another one here. This is a very controversial one that's making some considerable rounds on the internet. I'm not going to read it because it's one of those buzzwords, where you'll get shut down by YouTube if you even read the word. So I'm going to substitute the word with something else. But this is from a United States Secret Service Treasury Department document that has some interesting information about a group of people who were involved in the, I think this is a Cuban group, perhaps. Let's take a look. For the information of all offices concerned, 2165, I think is what it says, advised on November 26, 1963, that he had heard that one, and then it's kind of, you can't read it there. One Moley allegedly had been attempting to negotiate a sale of machine guns to one Echeverria, and that Echeverria, I think he's from Cuba. I think this is a Cuban group. Echeverria allegedly made a comment the day before the assassination of President John F. Kennedy that, quote, "We now have plenty of money. Our new backers are shoes," like Adidas, Nike, shoes. "As soon as we or they take care of Kennedy." So that's a weird thing, right? And of course, this is going to feed into a lot of the stuff that you see on Twitter, where people say that Israel was behind it. So yeah, that one is pretty fascinating, and there is a considerable amount of people on social media posting this one. Let's read the top part. Reference is made to the office memorandum to the chief from acting Sake Maurice Martineau, Chicago, dated 1963, under file. That memorandum confirming a long distance telephone call to Deputy Chief Paul Paternity verified that the matter had been discussed with Deputy Chief Paternity, who had directed that inasmuch as this information related to the assassination of the late President Kennedy, and that this information could also involve the protection of President Lyndon B. Johnson, that all information developed by the U.S. Secret Service should be made available to the FBI, and that a joint investigation should be conducted with an exchange of reports and a free flow of information. So yeah, that one is pretty interesting, right? Okay, so you'll probably be seeing that one a lot on Twitter. Let's look at some more here. Oh, this one. This might be the second one that I saw come up on social media as soon as the files were released. Um, Kennedy Jr., John F. Kennedy Jr., has some comments about former President Biden. At the time, he was Senator Joseph Biden. Um, so here's what it says: FBI, United States of Justice, evidence received 1994, personally delivered to a special agent, and that part is redacted. Envelope postmarked Worcester, Massachusetts, 1994, bearing the handwritten printed address Senator Joseph Biden, Capitol Building, Washington, D.C., accompanying handwritten, hand-printed letter dated 8/26 of 1994 from John F. Kennedy, it seems, beginning, "Dear Senator Biden, you are a traitor," and bearing the signature John F. Kennedy Jr. So John F. Kennedy Jr., um, felt that Biden was a traitor. I don't know the context behind this. I don't know what this, how this found its way into the JFK files. Obviously, there has to be some kind of connection there, but that one is pretty fascinating. JFK Jr. saying that Biden is a traitor to the country. So I guess we'll find out more information about that soon. And if y'all have any info about it, let me know. Okay, so concerning the Bay of Pigs comment that we had earlier, look at this one. So, newly released JFK files shed more light on Operation Mongoose, revealing that the CIA planned agriculture sabotage in Cuba using biological agents to trigger a crop failure. The documents confirmed that the CIA considered bioweapons for regime change in Cuba. Aerial spraying could have been a possible method for dispersing chemicals over farmland. The individuals in the document used subtle biological agents to avoid detection, ensuring no clear link to the United States. And so here's what it says. The group then turned to a discussion. General Carter emphasized the extreme sensitivity of any such operation and the disastrous results that would flow from anything going wrong, particularly if there were obvious attribution to the United States. So their concern isn't about, people dying. Their concern is more people finding out that the U.S. is behind this. He went on to say, however, that it would be possible to accomplish his purpose by methods more subtle than those indicated in the paper. He mentioned specifically the possibility of producing crop failures by the introduction of biological agents, which would appear to be of natural origin. Mr. Bundy said that he had no worries about any such sabotage, which could clearly be made to appear as the result of local Cuban disaffection of natural disaster, but that we must avoid external activities such as release of chemicals unless they could be completely covered up. So again, no real concern for human life. The concern was, let's just make sure that people don't find out that we're behind this if we do go through with it. And so the government is conspiring to engage in crop failure for another country so that there could be a regime change. Wow, that's concerning. So it makes you wonder, things that we thought were natural occurrences, how many of them was, some government behind. Here's an interesting one indicating that the CIA was operating as a state within a state, going against the interests of the United States. Schlesinger, the contemporary CIA, possesses many of the characteristics of a state within a state, he says. This was in the files. There is no doctrine governing our conduct of clandestine operations. Schlesinger slammed the idea that the CIA should fight fire with fire to defeat communism. Here you can see him mentioning of his concerns that the CIA was operating in this kind of way, going against the interests of the United States, and it was able to do so because it's a state within a state, further lending itself to the view that the CIA was in part, behind the JFK assassination. You ask, how could that happen? Well, if they're operating kind of as a state within a state, they have a lot of autonomy. They could get away with a lot more. Let me show you another one here.
We're talking upwards of like what?
Okay. You should be able to see your screen right around now. Bombshell: JFK Files, State Department ignored warning about Oswald plan to kill Kennedy. Newly declassified files reveal the State Department was warned months before the JFK assassination and did nothing. A whistleblower told U.S. officials in July '63 that Lee Harvey Oswald planned to kill the president, naming Soviet contacts and confirming Oswald had a weapon. The response: so what if Oswald got a weapon? A U.S. official shrugged. Now, thanks to the Trump's massive JFK document release, the truth is finally out. They could have stopped it. And they show further documentation for that. So, yeah, this definitely could have been prevented. And, I've heard some people respond to this kind of stuff, and they'll say, well, they get so many tips every day, and you don't know what's true and what isn't. And, you might know that this tip is legitimate after something happens, but, before it happens, you get so many of them, you don't know. There's going to be people who say that, but of course we're finding out that it's actually deeper than just an issue of how do you know what tip is legitimate or not. Okay, so this is just kind of a summary of what some people are concluding from this document dump. Here's what one person has posted on social media. Here's his rundown, his take on what we know so far. He says, so what do the JFK files tell us so far? JFK called Joe Biden a traitor. CIA orchestrated the entire assassination. He says there's links to Mossad in Israel. There's ties to the Khazarian mafia. And Gary Underhill was murdered after revealing it was a CIA operation. And so this is probably the standard talking points that are being made right now on Twitter, on social media. I think he kind of represents some of the common talking points. And so that's the main takeaways that I think a lot of people are coming away with on social media. And I suspect we'll be finding a whole lot more as historians, researchers, attorneys, and all sorts of people continue to sift through the 80,000 documents that are still being released. They're on the National Archives, by the way. If you want to go there, let me show you how to find the files. Okay. So if you just type in National Archives JFK Files, this should come up right here. And go to 2025 release, and you'll see here it is. 219 internet pages of all of these documents. Some of the documents are 1 page, 3 pages. Some are a lot longer. But you can see that there's a lot of information here, right? I mean, I'm just clicking on some random pages. You see how many documents. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 per page. And there's 219 of them. And you just open up one of these random ones, and here's 2 pages to it. And so, again, there's a lot of information to sift through here. So we'll be finding out more data on this as the months go by. And as we do, and if there's really big news, I'll certainly do another follow-up with y'all. And if you find out any additional information, please put it in the comment section. I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts about what we've seen so far? And do you have any contributions of your own to offer? If so, again, put them in the comment section. Don't forget to hit the like button and the subscribe button to stay up to date with more content from the Michael Lofton Show. All right, that's going to do it for today. We'll see you later. Hey, have you been benefiting from this channel, but you're not supporting it?
You're definitely guilty.
Get over to patreon.com/Reason and Theology and support this channel if you've been benefiting from the content.
Did I say get it done now?
And if you can't support the show financially, you should at least be subscribed, right? Am I right or am I right?
Yeah, I think he's right.
I'm right. So go and hit the subscribe button right now.